I'm here, everybody. Or maybe I'm here. What about here? Or maybe just over here. Nah, I'm just messing with you. I'm here with the latest episode of BattleGUIDES, featuring Arec. Arec is a trickster-type character who makes use of his great effects, amazing hit confirm, and devastating unique ability to control the battle. However, that all comes at the cost of needing some degree of prediction, some degree of resource management, as well as having some quirky ranges. Arec's unique ability is Subtle Influence. Arec has 4 influence tokens and may ante one of them during the ante phase of a beat. Now these tokens, when anteed, have certain penalties or restrictions that apply to Arec and the closest opponent. Now, remember, Arec can regain these tokens by means of his card effects. However, one thing to note is the fact that Arec can't regain the same token that he antes in the beat. This means that if he were to ante token A, he can't use an effect later on in that beat to regain token A. He can only regain other tokens that he's anteed long ago. Now, quick trivia about this unique ability. Brad's actually coined the term for these kinds of characters, and they're called show tokens. You know, like Shoto characters in other fighting games. So, other characters who have this kind of mechanic are, well, Hikaru and originally Pentros, but then Pentros deviated a bit. Now, in order to understand this unique ability even better, we have to go to the tokens, because quite honestly, they're the most important part. So, let's start off with Fear. Fear is a token that is very powerful because it cancels out all start of beat effects. Note that it might say end of beat effects, but we removed that because it was kind of too broken, so there was an official errata that came out. Now, stopping start of beat effect is really powerful because it allows Arec to deal with bursts for free. On the other hand, it's also really good against speedsters, fast characters, because most of their movement and hit confirm comes from start of beat effects. Next up is Hesitation. Hesitation is the token everybody hates because it cancels out before activating and after activating effects. This basically means that a lot of people's form of hit confirm is negated, which makes it so that they will probably miss if you play this on the right beat. Also, as the biggest bonus ever, it also works as an anti-able dash counter. That's just simply amazing. This is one of your most powerful tokens, and I highly suggest using it sparingly because you don't want to lose it at the wrong time. Next up is Mercy. Mercy is a token that cancels out on-hit and on-damage effects, and this is very powerful in the sense that a lot of speedsters and a lot of tricksters make use of on-hit and on-damage effects to stun you or move you somewhere around the board and gain superior board positioning. And that's something Arec doesn't want other people to have. So this is a very useful thing if you're up against tricky opponents, fast opponents. Another added bonus is the fact that Grasp no longer counters strike in melee range if you play this token, which makes it very nice. And finally, we have Recklessness. Recklessness makes it so that you and your opponent ignore both power and priority bonuses. Note, that's just bonuses, not penalties, meaning that your values can still become lower than they usually are, but never higher. This is very interesting because Arec has no natural way of gaining power or priority bonuses, which means that this token might as well just be affecting your nearest opponent instead, which is very crucial because Arec, being a trickster, doesn't have a lot of big stats, which means that other characters that have really high stats, like Schecter, or maybe Eligor, or maybe Hepzibah, have really obscene stats that he can't fight against sometimes. Use this to equalize the battlefield and surprise opponents by making them waste their resources. One good thing to note is that you can wait for your opponents to ante their tokens first, then ante Recklessness to make those antes pointless. This unique ability is arguably why everybody thinks Arec is so hard to deal with, and quite honestly, I don't blame them because it's one of the strongest unique abilities around. However, it's not unstoppable for mainly 2 reasons. Number 1 is the fact that Arec himself gets affected by these things too, which means that the only real advantage Arec gets is the fact that he knows when and what is coming. So, because of that, if Arec is negating your dash, he's technically also negating his dash. It limits his options as well. And knowledge of Arec's tokens and what they can do to you is very important to make sure that he does not mess you up. And as an Arec player, that's something you have to take advantage of. You have to take advantage of the fact that your tokens are affecting the way other people think and the way that other people play. This really affects the gameplay. And it really means that you have to be careful about which tokens you have. Without the right tokens in hand, your opponent won't care. And number 2, this is about having the right tokens in hand. You see, because of the nature of a show token character, Arec can't have the pertinent token all the time. So, for example, he spent Hesitation now, he won't have it next beat. For sure, guaranteed. And that's when most people should strike. And that's when you should be on your most defensive. Because if an enemy or an opponent is able to predict you and you spend the wrong token, they can then smack you in the face really hard with that card or attack pair that they have that was originally countered by that token. So it takes a lot of prediction and it takes a lot of resource management to use this unique ability properly, so watch out for that. And let's move on to his cards. Now, since this is Flight 4 already, I won't go through the basics of the cards. For example, if it has an on-hit move the opponent, you guys should know by now that it's meant for dodging opponents or it's meant for pulling opponents closer to you for better board positioning next turn. Those are all basic stuff that you guys should know by now. If not, I suggest watching the earlier videos. Now, for the purposes of this video onwards, I'll just go over the new ones that you guys might not have seen the first time you saw these cards. First up is Phantom. Phantom is really great because it allows you to ignore Soak, which might not seem that good, but it lets Arec get some damage in against Juggernauts who he usually can't damage really hard. However, the most pertinent thing about this is that the end of beat effect allows Arec to regain a token, no questions asked. Meaning that this serves as a really effective way of gaining tokens back. However, that does come at the cost of being a generally weak attack in terms of power, which is often, well, made up for by the fact that it's fast and has a lot of range. But be careful, this attack is generally weak, meaning that you generally won't stun your opponent and he'll trade with you, meaning that he'll almost always trade even or higher. In light of that, I highly suggest pairing this attack with Grasp to take advantage of all that speed, or Dash so that you can get the token back for free. Next up is Manipulative. Manipulative has a lot of things going for it. Well, most of all, the fact that it regains you a token on damage. However, most people would probably be interested with the on-hit effect, which is really a fancy way of saying Arec gets to pick one of the bases in his opponent's hand. And if the opponent does play that base the next turn, Arec deals extra damage to that opponent. Now, that's really good for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's straight up more damage if your opponent does fall for it. However, the second benefit is if he doesn't play the attack. You see, this card is all about mind games, as the name of it should tell you. The mind games with this is that you're trying to make it so that your opponent will play sub-optimally, and if he wants to play optimally, he has to take damage for it. It's really good if you hit with this attack, however, the problem is it doesn't have a lot of hit confirm. In light of that, I highly suggest pairing this attack with Drive to give it hit confirm, or Hex to give it hit confirm. Next up is Perceptional. Perceptional is very interesting and quite arguably what many people would say is Arec's strongest style because of its start of beat effect. Start of beat effect is devastating, allowing Arec to use an extra token that beat. But to many people that doesn't seem like a lot. So what? He gets to spend another one. No. The thing is that it happens start of beat, which means it happens after reveal, which means Arec will know what attack pair you have played before he makes the selection of his token. This can be used in 2 ways. Number 1, you can use it as a countermeasure to make sure that after you play your first token, you have another way of countering just in case you didn't predict your opponent right. However, what most people do is that they can just not anti a token at all and then see their opponent's attack pair, then counter accordingly. It's a great way of managing your resources very intelligently, and I highly suggest that you use this sparingly because it's really powerful. Most people will see it coming. So if they find a way to do an attack that doesn't rely on any triggers at all, they'll try to play it along with your Perceptionals, and Perceptionals can't do anything against attacks with no triggers. Now, also note that this attack is only as strong as the tokens that you have, which means that if you don't have any tokens, this attack does nothing. So be careful about that. In light of that, I highly suggest pairing this attack with Grasp so that you can take advantage of that range, and Hex so that you can ignore the pesky minimum range on it. Next up is one of my personal favorite styles, and it's Mirrored. Mirrored is very interesting because of the fact that attacks at range 2 don't hit Arec, which makes it a very good dodge style against opponents who don't do any triggered effects. You see, a lot of counter to Arec is just playing attacks that don't have triggered effects at all. However, if you do that, that basically means you're staying stationary. And if you do that, Arec can use Mirror to dodge your attack and gain a free turn above you, which is absolutely devastating if you don't see it coming. Another benefit to this is the end of beat effect, which allows Arec to play as a clone on the board. Now, the clone marker just basically means that at the start of the anti-phase the next turn, Arec can swap places with the clone and remove it. This is very devastating because Arec now technically has two possible positions he'll be in. He can either stay or move, and this messes with opponents so hard, especially messes with their spacing, because technically if you play your cards right, no space on the board is safe, and there's no place that they can dodge to effectively. So use this very well to control the board and control your opponent's spacing. Now, in light of that, I highly suggest pairing this with Drive to make for one of the best opening moves in the game. Or if you're really feeling that you just want the clone marker for the next turn, you can pair it with Dash as well. Next up is Returning. Returning is a counter style, meaning that at the start of the beat, if you and the opponent played the same base, Arec not only stuns that opponent, but his range becomes 1-6, meaning that almost always Arec will hit you in the face. As an added benefit, it's not only fast with plus priority, it's also fast in the sense that it wins priority ties, which makes it very useful against opponents who might want to clash you out of this attack. This attack is very, very good, not only for the counter effect, but also stat-wise, because it not only has obscene range, it's also relatively fast with average power. All of that combined together makes this attack very, very strong. But of course, it's at its strongest if and only if you get the opponent's base right. Be careful though, because you have to play the base to counter it, meaning that if you don't have the base in your hand, you can't counter it. So whatever's in your discard and whatever's in your opponent's discard heavily influence what cards you play with this attack. However, if you're not planning to counter anything at all, I highly suggest pairing this with Drive so that you can get super duper range, or Strike to take advantage of that extra range. Hex is quite arguably one of my favorite unique bases in the game because the range of Hex is the space where your opponent is, which means that it will almost never miss. Hex will almost always hit the opponent, and it's crazy obscene if you look at the Power 3 and the Priority 3, which are generally average stats, but absolutely devastating with the fact that it hits everywhere, almost all the time. However, that does come at the cost of never stunning. Do remember that stunning the opponent is very pertinent, especially as a trickster, because you can't trade very well. The problem is, this attack doesn't stun, and that basically means that your opponent gets a free trade with you. So be careful about that. Use the on-hit effect to your advantage to dodge the opponent's attack while regaining a token. It's great. I highly suggest pairing it with Perceptional to get rid of Perceptional's pesky minimum range, and Manipulative to get Manipulative that range it desperately needs. Arec's two overdrive finishers are Dominate Person and Uncanny Oblivion. Dominate Person is a mid-range overdrive finisher that's not that fast and doesn't hit that hard. However, the effect it brings you is what's truly devastating about it, because if you hit your opponent with this overdrive, well, not only do you get to pick their attack pair for them, you also control all their decisions the next beat, which is crazy. Which basically means that not only does Arec win this beat, he also wins the next one. And that is absolutely devastating, because not only is it free damage the next beat, Arec can also make you waste your strongest attack and he'll just dodge it. Because basically, he knows what you're gonna play, and he's gonna force you to play really, really bad. So be careful about getting this overdrive to work, because it's not that fast and you might be stunned. But if you do get it to work, it's the most hype thing ever, I swear. So if hype and awesomeness and generally good range are your thing, this is the overdrive for you. However, if that's not your thing, Uncanny Oblivion is a mid-range overdrive finisher that doesn't hit that hard but is extremely fast. Now, this attack is very, very interesting because unlike the first one, which has great range, this has poor range because it's only range 2, which makes it very burstable and very dashable. However, the on-hit effect is devastating as well because when you hit your opponent, you put their attack pair out of the game, which basically means that those 2 cards that comprise their attack pair no longer exist, and they only have to work with 4 styles and the remaining 6 bases they have, which is absolutely crazy. As an added benefit, it acts like a pseudo stun, because you remove the cards from the game, your opponent has nothing left to activate for his attack pair, which means that he can't do anything, which might as well be stunned. So, if more reliability and faster moves are your thing, this is the overdrive for you. Now, remember that Arec's tokens still work when you use your overdrives. So keep that in mind when you want to avoid opponents' dashes or bursts, because you can use that token of yours to counter it, and then your overdrive will hit and it'll be amazing and people will go, whoa. Now when it comes to actually using a special action, Arec really likes cancel because he's able to remove that one pesky attacker that has no triggered effects. And in terms of pulse, Arec doesn't really need it because he has so much movement and so much hit confirmed that he barely even cares. But if you do want to dodge an opponent's attack that's way too devastating for you to deal with, especially if you don't have any more tokens because you've made so many misplays, I can justify the use of a pulse. Now let's move on to that part that everybody loves. Arec Advanced Strategies and Combos. Arec Advanced Strategies is, strangely enough, not too advanced. Actually, it's based upon one of the most fundamental things about competitive BattleCON that I can share with all of you. Now, I've been telling a lot of people this on the forums, especially when they ask me, how do I beat Arec? And the thing is that beating Arec and playing Arec, quite frankly, it's all about tempo. All about not winning every beat. You see, most new players are obsessed with having to hit the opponent and deal all the damage, especially when using big juggernaut payout characters or big risky characters like Hepzibah, Demetras, Cadenza, Mikhail. All of these characters are all about cashing out the damage. However, Arec is the kind of character that doesn't necessarily want to cash out the damage. And what do I mean? Sometimes Arec doesn't want to play the attack that will hit the opponent for the most amount of damage. And quite frankly, that's true because sometimes you want to play a Phantom. Sometimes you have to play Mirror. Sometimes you have to play Hex because of the fact that Arec needs tempo to work. Due to its show token properties, Arec can't get access to all of his tokens immediately, especially somewhere midpoint in the game where he spent some tokens during beats, because of the clause that says that he can't regain the same token he anti, which means that the moment he antis his first of the 4, he'll be down 1 token immediately the next beat, no questions asked. And that presents a problem to many Arec players, because in order to regain their strengths, which is arguably again why most people hate Arec, in order to regain his tokens back, he has to spend turns regaining them explicitly. And the thing is, if you notice, it's 3 token regain cards: Phantom, Manipulative, and Hex. What's the common thread among these 3? And it's the fact that they're all generally weak plays. Phantom has low power. Manipulative has crap range. And Hex doesn't stun opponents. If you look at all of that properly, you'll see that they're not big plays. They're not plays wherein Arec deals a lot of damage. However, they are plays wherein Arec gains the resources he needs to beat you out the next beat, and the next beat, and the next beat. So sometimes it's not all about winning the beat. Sometimes it's about losing a beat or causing null beats so that you can get your resources back effectively. And it's all about the tempo. Remember, don't be too predictable when you play your resource gaining cards, because if the opponent sees it coming, he'll smack you hard then, and you won't even get to regain anything unless you're playing Phantom. So be careful about that and take that to your advantage. Another Arec strategy that is very, very important is knowing your opponent's discards. Knowing your opponent's discards might be, again, a basic thing. However, it's very, very important on Arec, and in fact, a lot of prediction characters, because they need to know what options their opponents have so that they can counter appropriately. So be careful about that, because you need to counter your opponent effectively, because again, you're a trickster and you don't deal all the damage. One other thing to note is that Arec is very susceptible to being card locked. And I mean it, it's not a joke, he's very, very susceptible to being card locked. All of his styles are not powerful at all. All of them are just quirky stuff that he can do. Except maybe for returning, which is amazing stats. But the thing is, Arec is an average character. Anybody who's specialized will beat him into the ground, especially if he runs out of tokens. So don't run out of tokens and manage your cards well. Because although they're just weird hodgepodges of effects sometimes, those are the effects you need to effectively counter your opponent's strategy when mixed with a base or a specific token. So watch out for that. Now let's go to some Arec combos. This will be very simple. Let's start off with Mirror Drive. Mirror Drive is a great move because it has obscene amounts of range. And you can use Drive to get into the range 2 you need to dodge the opponent. And what better way as a consolation than to get a clone on the board to set you up for next beat and mean that you practically win because your opponent has to guess from 2 directions now instead of just 1. Another attack that I highly recommend is using Perceptional Strike. This attack is quite amazing because of Perceptional's properties that allow you to counter whatever move your opponent decides to pick, but it also works well with strikes. Stun Guard. Because again, remember how we said Perceptional's weakness was the fact that opponents with no triggered effects would be not affected by it? Well, the thing is, Strike lets you counter that by having obscene amounts of stun guard. So if they do go faster than you and hit you for some damage, you run through it and hit them back for 4. It's amazing, it's effective, use it well. And finally, we have Phantom Dash. Phantom Dash is a no-brainer. It basically means I regain a free token and I skip this beat because I just want to get my token back. It's very, very interesting in that sense because not only are you regaining a token, not only are you dodging your opponent, you're also getting rid of one of your worst cards. Because quite honestly, Phantom isn't that good. No matter what people tell you, I will say it's not so good. Because of the fact that it's basically a weaker returning. That's all it is. You need to take advantage of Phantom strengths, and that's the end of beat regain token. So use that well, and use it with Dash. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of Battle Guides. I'm so sorry this came out late. Again, it's finals month. I am absolutely swamped with work. But by the end of next week, finals month will be done, and I will have semestral break. And that means I can get to writing all the scripts for those prize videos I promised. Again, I'm so sorry it's taking so long. And after that, I'll be able to start some new shows that I've been planning. I'm actually planning to do this show wherein I do gameplay of BattleCON, so you guys will get to see that. It'll be really fun. Though I'll probably play against the AI first, since it's hard to coordinate with me. Aside from that, thank you all so much for being patient. Again, at the end of this video, you guys can vote, and thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget your special action. Thank you, World of Indines. Thank you, and good night.